Hi, welcome back to Bookish Brummy. My name's Mel, and in this video we're going to talk about all the books that I read in the last week. So I like to do a sort of mini review, which I try to do without spoilers, so you can see if you want to read it or not. Now I did a video on Monday where I introduced the idea of Big Book January, because I have lots of big books collecting on my shelves that I've not really been able to get around to for the last couple of months, because the kind of reading prompts I've been following have not really sort of allowed for bigger books. So I'm just going to put up on the screen now all of the books that I sort of said on Monday were the ones I'm going to pick out of for the rest of January to read. So I just want to correct a mistake I made in the Monday video as well. So you'll notice that one of the books on there has changed. So initially I said that I was really looking forward to reading The 12 by Justin Cronin, and I'd thought that this was the first book in the trilogy. As it turns out, I just had them shelved incorrectly at the time. This is actually the second book in the series, I realised after I put the video out there, and actually the first book in the series is called The Passage, which I do have. I've got the whole of this trilogy because it looks really good. However, this book definitely fits the big book criteria, because this book is even bigger than the last one. This book is about 970 pages, so this actually makes it bigger than Insomnia by Stephen King. And Insomnia was the biggest book out of all of the books that I had on the list to pick out of, but now this one is. That doesn't put me off it at all. I think it still looks like a really good read, but I just wanted to point out that one of the books in the pile has changed to this one, because obviously there's no point in me starting in the middle of the trilogy. I need to get to this one first. So I'm hoping it's a really good trilogy, because all of the books in this trilogy are absolutely massive. Okay, so now I've just resolved that issue. I did say as well on Monday that I had read a book since the beginning of the year, since the new year, and that one did not exactly qualify for Big Book January, because the qualification as a big book for this month is going to be 500 pages. So that's not to say that I don't think books over, that are like maybe just over 400 pages aren't big books, but for the sake of what I'm doing this month, I was looking at books that were over 500 pages. However, I didn't come up with the idea of Big Book January until I had nearly finished reading the first book that I was reading of the year. So the first book I read this year was actually Cell by Stephen King. Now, this is not a tiny book either, because this is 475 pages roughly, or 473 I think. So it's not like it's a tiny book, but it just misses out on being at the 500 page mark. But that's fine. I've also had, in what I want to do this year, is I wanted to read like about 30 Stephen King books. So I thought, start the year on an author that you know you'll like, and one that you know that you've got to read a lot of books from. And the reason that I picked Cell is because I haven't seen this reviewed that much. And whenever I look at ratings, this one isn't really particularly up there. Nobody really talks about it. In fact, I've seen people list it as one of their least favourite Stephen King books. So I thought the premise on the back sounded quite good. It's obviously something to do with a mobile phone. So I was like, well, I'll give that one a go, because I actually think it sounds alright. So the details of this book is this was published in 2006. And it's part of the epic thriller series in the Ultimate Storyteller collection. So the other kind of books that we've got in that series is the one that I've just read, which was Needful Things. So I'd enjoyed that one. It is in that, and Insomnia is also part of this collection as well. So I've had a good time with Needful Things and with it. So I do quite like his thrillers, so I thought, yeah, I probably will like this. So what I would say from this, immediately as I started the book, it was completely different to a lot of Stephen King's that I've read before. So normally in my experience, Stephen King takes about 100 pages to set the scene, get the characters bedded in, before you really begin to understand where the story is going or what the main plot line is. That didn't happen in this book. It's like on the first page, bang, straight away an event has happened and the characters are involved, and actually you need to learn about the characters as the event is unfolding, which, as I said, is a bit different from what you'd normally do with Stephen King's books and his characters. But I didn't actually find that a problem. I quite liked that sort of, boom, we started the book. As I say, the only thing is that I didn't get a chance to sort of decide how I felt about the characters before the event was happening. So our main character in this is a guy called Clayton Riddell, and he is this graphic designer, and he is out away from his family in Boston, and he's sort of trying to do a deal with his work, and he just got signed for some work in the morning, and then he's like outside in public in Boston, because that's another thing as well, we're in Boston, we're not actually in Maine for this, we're in Massachusetts, so we're not far away from Maine, but that's another thing with Stephen King. He normally sets his books in Maine, but this one is actually in Boston, which is a little bit different as well. But yeah, so our main character is stood out in public, and then all of a sudden this big event happens, and it's, as I say, it's different. Like, the main event that happened is sort of like Stephen King's take on a zombie apocalypse. So it's like apocalyptic horror. And I really wasn't expecting that from a Stephen King book. A lot of his horror novels are actually quite subtle in a way. It's not like a gore fest. Whereas what I would say with this novel, if you're a little bit touchy about reading about gore and injuries and things like that, then you may not particularly like this one, because there's lots of injuries, there's kind of lots of zombie type people walking around, and there's some very vivid descriptions of what those injuries are and how they also hurt each other. So automatically this sort of makes it different from a normal Stephen King, because he's not really writing about blood and gore a lot of the time either. And I personally don't like zombie apocalypse films. I never choose to watch them. I think I've watched a couple when I was younger, and I just find them a bit brain dead, excuse the pun, and I'm not really into them. So when I realised what this was when I started it, I was a bit concerned about how the rest of the book was going to go, because I was a bit like, you know, we have this main event that sets off where essentially we find ourselves in this like sort of zombie apocalypse. And after about 150 pages of this, you're sort of thinking, well, where exactly is this going then? What can we do with this? What can we do with our characters? But I actually really like the way that Stephen King unfolded the story in this. We sort of start off with our main character, Clayton. And then there's another character, Tom, who he joins up with. And then they also join up with this 15-year-old girl called Alice. And they're sort of basically on a couple of smaller missions, but essentially they're just trying to find out what's going on with the rest of the population. They then meet some other people that give them some theories about what's going on, and then they basically have to try and make it to a certain point where they believe that other survivors might be. So, you know, it's sort of, I think a lot of the story is more about the journey of them trying to get to the place rather than actually getting to the place, which is fine. I didn't mind that at all. Was a little bit iffy about some of our main character Clayton's thoughts about the Alice character. She's only 15 years old, but I do feel like it's a bit disturbing when Stephen King is writing about the male gaze from Clayton's point of view on this 15-year-old girl. And it's a bit confusing as well, because it's like, on the one hand, he sort of, you know, the main character seeing this 15-year-old as a child, and on the other hand, he's like looking at the shape of her breasts and talking about how perfect her skin is. So I find that a little bit disturbing. And there's like a conversation that happens between Tom and Clayton when Alice is having nightmares about something, and they talk about, oh, you know, you could get into bed with her, but you don't have to worry about me, I'll just keep her safe. And the other one is like, yeah, sure, like, I know. And you're thinking, well, you're saying that, but then in your mind, when you're sort of narrating this story, I'm a little bit concerned about you. So I have heard people mention they get a bit disturbed by the male gaze sometimes in Stephen King novels, and I haven't noticed it that much in the ones that I've read, or it hasn't really bothered me. But it did kind of bother me a little bit with this character, because she's obviously underage, and I found it a bit creepy from the main character he was doing that, especially in that he is a father himself. So that was a little bit off-putting, and that was kind of like what made me thought, I don't like this main character to begin with. However, as the story unfolds, I do begin to like this main character Clayton more and more and more, and I do sort of get more on his side. Most of the time I do like the main characters that Stephen King sets out in a novel, and it's not really an effort for me to like them, but I had to try quite hard with Clayton and follow the story for quite some time before I was actually sort of really on his side. However, I do think a lot of that might be because I never really had that 100 pages before the story kicked off to actually get to know the character and to understand the character's motivations. So yeah, I see that as well. With regards to the ending of the story, I thought it was a little bit weak. And I think that when it came to our main character's ending, like how the story ended for our main character Clayton, I thought that that was absolutely fine. There were some questions left unanswered, and I think Stephen King is really good at doing those endings where, our character, you're never really sure, like, is it a good ending for them or isn't it? Because there's always like a bit of a but question. And so I liked that for our main character Clayton. I thought that that was good. But where I thought that it fell down a little bit is this whole event that's kicked off. We've got sort of theories from random people throughout the book, and they come together to talk about their theories, but nothing is actually proven. We don't actually really know why this event happened in the first place or who set this event off. And I would have kind of liked to have had more of an answer to that, I think. I'd also say that I thought that this was quite cleverly done. So, as I say, when I thought it was a zombie apocalypse just straight out, I was a bit like, oh no, like I'm probably not going to like this. But actually, because there was a bit of a technological aspect to it, I actually enjoyed that potential sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, the characters, when they're trying to understand like what's happening to them, they're sort of talking about from a technological perspective. And trying to think of the human brain like a computer hard drive, and I sort of really liked that interpretation, and I thought that made it a little bit it was more interesting to me, and that was quite clever actually. Interestingly as well, I did read in this book that Stephen King doesn't have a cell phone. However, because this was written in 2006, I mean, we're talking, it was actually published in January 2006 as well, so this was like 20 years ago, so I'm probably willing to bet he's got a mobile phone now. I think with regards to horror, this is actually one of his better ones, like when it comes to horror. So I've read it, this is the 29th one I've read now, and I wouldn't say a lot of them have been that scary that I've read. Cujo Comes Out has been the scariest one that I've read so far. But this one, I can definitely see where the scare and the fear factor comes in here, and I think that's probably down to the descriptions of gore and stuff that we have in here. But I would recommend this one for a Halloween read. I think that it would actually fit quite well in there. So I think my overall rating that I'm going to give it is a 3.75. It's not a 5. And I think that it's not quite a 4 because I still feel like there was a couple of things like explanations that weren't quite there that I wanted to be there. But I also felt like our characters understood a lot about what was going on to them with very, very little information. And that might just be me nitpicking, but essentially, if chaos suddenly kicks off around you and you have no way of knowing from anybody what on earth is going on, how on earth you could sort of work out what they'd worked out in such a short amount of time, I was like, that's a little bit unbelievable. But I did enjoy this story, and I would read this story again. I think I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to, especially when I first started reading it and realised what the subject matter was. But also from the reviews that I'd read on this before, and the fact that it tends to rate low in people's ratings, I really, wasn't really sure what I was going to think of this book, and actually, I actually really, really like it. Yes, it's quite different from other things that he writes, but I wouldn't write it off. I'd give it a go. If you like Stephen King, and I think it's worth a read, and I definitely would go for it again. So, as I say, that's the only book that I've managed to fully complete reading in this last week, and that one was quite hefty anyway at 475 pages. But when I got to the end of that book and I thought I'm going to do Big Book January, there was one particular book on that list which I think if you've been around for a little bit, you know that I've been dying to get to. So I have started The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice. Now, I read Interview with the Vampire as part of my spooky reads back in October, and I really loved the book. I thought it was brilliant. I mean, I'd watched the film quite a few times when I was younger, and never actually got around to reading the book. And the book, to me, it's hard to say that it was better than the film, but I think the film and the book actually complement each other really well, and I enjoyed that book a lot more than I thought I was going to. It wasn't just a rehash of the film. There was a lot of interesting details in there that actually weren't in the film. But as a result of reading that book, I was even more interested in the character Lestat, so I was absolutely delighted that the second book in that series is basically Lestat's backstory. So at the moment I'm quite far through this. I'm 400 pages in, and this book is about 550 pages long, so I've still got about 150 pages to read. So I think once I had a bit of a read tonight, I'll probably end up finishing this tomorrow night. Now, like Interview with the Vampire, this is more of a character study. There isn't a particular plot going on where, you know, Lestat has to achieve something or go somewhere. You know, this is really, it's almost like the author took her notes on Lestat and then, you know, wrote them down so that they were in a nice readable story, which I don't mind because I wanted to know more about the Lestat character. But as I understand it, in the Vampire Chronicles there's about 13 books, and this is only at number 2. And Lestat, again, as I understand from the Vampire Chronicles, is quite a key player in other books. So I think this book could be considered more of like it's scene setting and character setting, so that we understand this character before we get into other stories further on down in the Vampire Chronicles, where there is actually a plot and the characters have to achieve something or do something. So I don't really mind, but I think it's taking me just a little bit longer because it's not like a thriller, like a page turner. This is more of a slow burn as we're getting to know the character. I'm enjoying it a lot, but I'm not going to give my final thoughts on it obviously until I finish the book, so I will do that next Thursday because I should have finished this book by then. But I'm really pleased that I finally managed to start reading this, because I've been eyeing this up on my shelf since I bought it in October. I bought it immediately after I finished reading Interview with Vampire, so I can't wait to get into this, and it's not disappointing so far. Now, I was thinking, and I said in the video that I posted on Monday, that with these books I'm really excited about all of these big books that I have to read, and I'm not particularly bothered in which order that I read them. You know, I've been sort of wanting to delve into all of these for some time. Some of these books I've actually had for quite some time. I haven't had any for longer than a year. I'd say the oldest one that I have on my shelf is probably the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. I think I bought that in around about August time. So that's the oldest one on there, but I have interest in reading all of them. So I actually was thinking, which one am I going to read after I finish Lestat? And actually I don't really know, but I actually don't mind which one. So I thought in this video what I would do is I have written all of the 7 that are left onto little pieces of paper in here, and I'm just going to blindly pick the next one out, and that will be the next one I read after Lestat. Because honestly, sometimes, you know, you can stand in front of your bookshelf for about half an hour just gazing at them all, totally paralysed by the decision that you have to make. So this means I can just know which one to pick up, and as I said, I'm not really fussed which one it is. So let's give them a good shake. Okay, and one here. So which one do we have? Okay, so we have the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. So actually that's quite a good thing, as I said, because I've actually had this one out of all of them on here the longest. So it would be nice to actually finally get that read. So this one is sitting at 614 pages. So it's not by any means one of the biggest ones in the pile, it's about like midway. But yeah, I really look forward to getting into this one. And as I said before, I read on the back that it's like a dysfunctional version of Louisa M.A. Alcott's Little Women. And I actually really enjoyed Little Women. Now, Barbara Kingsolver also wrote Demon Copperhead, which was a Women's Prize for Fiction winner a couple of years ago. I think it was the 2024 Women's Prize for Fiction winner. and that was one of my favourite books that I read last year, so I'm absolutely dying to read some more Barbara Kingsolver, so I'm really happy that I picked that one out of the pile. So when we have a catch up next Thursday, hopefully I will have finished Lestat by that point and I'll be able to give a review on that. And if I'm lucky, I might have finished the Poisonwood Bible as well and be able to give a review on that as well. I have realised that I have to read Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen by Tuesday. I thought I had 2 weeks to read this book before my book group, and then I realised that I've miscalculated. So I am going to have to start reading that as soon as I finish Lestat if I want to take part in that physical book group. But I'm not, as I said, I'm not entirely looking forward to reading that book. It's sort of out of my comfort zone and not really something that I'm in the mood for right now, or something that I've picked. So I think I'll start reading it, and then I will probably read this alongside it, just so I don't go into a reading slump really. So yeah, let me know if you have read any of the books that I've reviewed this week. If you've read a lot of Stephen King, let me know what you think of Cell, if you've read it, and if you found that it was different to his other books as well, and did you enjoy it? And then also let me know on the big book list that I posted at the beginning, have you read any of those? Are there any that you would recommend that I move on to immediately after the Poisonwood Bible? So thanks for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please press the like button. And if you'd like to see any of my future content and want to know when it's out, please press the subscribe button. I intend to post a video on Monday. I'm not entirely sure what that video is going to be yet, but I have a feeling that I might do an in-depth summary review of a book called The Memory Police that I had read in December. It was a really good book. Really enjoyed it, and I actually had a lot more to say about it than I could fit in a small review, so I think we'll probably do that on Monday. So I'll see you all soon. Have a great weekend. Bye!